Okay, everyone, good morning. This is the Policy Leadership Academy, and this is Module 5. So I think we're at the halfway point. Let me just make sure we're muted. This is the halfway point. We are at Module 5. And just a reminder about us, the Leadership Academy, the Policy Leadership Academy brings together stakeholders and community residents to understand and address local, statewide, and federal issues through a shared knowledge of causes and impact, current problem-solving frameworks, and best practices and actions to address change with an emphasis on policy. Our timeline, we're actually at the end of August. So this is our last module for August, and we'll be together for September, October, and then we will end in the middle of October. So super excited, but we are at the end. Our agenda today is our speaker, Kymberly Garrett. She will have her presentation and then followed by a Q&A. And today we do have with us Kymberly Garrett with Children's Bureau. Her topic will be communicating with difficult people. And if you can bear with me, I'm to introduce her. With over 30 years of progressive human resources experience in varying disciplines, Kymberly Garrett has a background using a holistic human resources management style. Kymberly supports all levels of professional development and has created cutting-edge programs in talent acquisition, talent and performance management, and executive coaching. Whether creating customized leadership training programs or facilitating change management initiatives, Kymberly utilizes her experience in both Fortune 500 companies and startups, as well as private and nonprofit organizations to help guide teams into becoming sustainable, high impact, and high performing teams. Kymberly is certified through various human resources and training organizations and also teaches human resources practice. Additionally, she serves on various advisory boards and is listed as a subject matter expert with many labor-related governmental agencies. Kymberly, a Chicago native, has called Southern California home for the last 18 years. She holds an MBA from the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University, and it's my pleasure to welcome Kymberly to this module this morning. Kymberly, take it away.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you so much. Good morning. Good morning. Happy Tuesday. Happy Tuesday. I am all about energy, so I'm just letting you know I am your cup of coffee. So if you haven't had it yet, you're about to have an espresso. How's that? And it's called Kymberly Garrett. Before we get started, I want to introduce Melvin Valentine. Melvin is my right-hand person through this journey that we're going to spend for the next couple of hours. And Melvin will be our producer for this event. Well, thank you, Tracy, once again, for inviting me to this wonderful, wonderful program. I am such a fan. I was sharing in the green room before we started about what a fan I am of this beautiful academy. And I'm just honored and thrilled. I think my feelings would have been so hurt if they didn't ask me back because I just love this topic. I love being able to spend time with you. So how do we handle, how do we handle communicating with difficult? No, we're not going to call them difficult. We're going to call them challenging. They're challenging. So those challenging people, you know who they are. Let's just kind of think about that for a second. Let's get a picture, let's get a visual of a challenging person in your world, in your universe. It could be at work, it could be at home, it could be anywhere. Because this training that we put together this morning is really around dealing with people who are different than us. Sometimes it's just about style. Communication styles can be a little different. Where we come from, as Tracy just said, I'm from Chicago. I'm a Chicagoan, and I can bring that Chicago out pretty good. And that's a very different thing, right? You know, I'm here in LA for 20 years, but in there, you know, there's that Chicago girl, and every now and then she just rears up and people go, whoa, where's that? We're like laid back. We're all chilled here in LA. Where's that coming from? And I'm like, under stress, I'm a Chicago girl. So we come with all of our stuff, and guess what? Here's the big rub. Tiara, I'm going to tell you a secret already this morning. Right now, Flora, I'm going to tell you a secret. Somebody might think you might be a challenging person too. No, could it be possible? Could it be possible, friend, that you might be the challenging or difficult person? No, I'm sure that, Elvia, it is not possible. It is not possible, but we're going to learn on both sides of the fence today. How's that? So let's get going. Hey, Day, I see you, Chicago girl. I got you. All right, so before we get started, about half an hour ago, you probably didn't even realize we were transporting you from wherever you are to one of the hottest, most exciting cities in the country, right? Las Vegas. And you know how it is. You're coming into McCarran, you're coming in, you land, and you get through and you're excited. The adrenaline is pumping. And the first thing you think about when you get into the airport is, I can't wait to get to the casino. I can't wait to go shop. But you know what that big sign is? Just as you cross the threshold at McCarran Airport, if you've been there, it says, what? What does it say? Melvin, what does it say?
What happens here stays here.
There we go. So we might share, we might bear, we might, really give a lot of information this morning. Let's just not make sure that we're not taking that out and putting it out in the newspaper somewhere, because this is a safe space and we want to make sure that we have a safe space to share, learn, and grow. I am all about, and you probably have picked this up in 3.5 minutes, I am all about engaging you. And that's super important for me, is to engage. And so I'm going to be, shuttling through and checking out your names. And what I'm going to ask from you is, where you can, where possible, please keep your camera on. And that's just because that's how I engage in a virtual environment. I need to be able to get your energy so I can give you energy back. And plus I might call on you. So please keep your screen on to maximize the experience. So let's keep going. All right, so the topic today, communicating with, not difficult, but challenging people. Who are those folks and how do we do that? Ooh, it can be something. I'm here to tell you, you know it and I know it. First of all, we know that fundamentally communication is essential when it comes to connecting with others. It's how we do it. That we may communicate in lots of different ways, right? It may come at us from the standpoint of talking, smiling, engaging. Some people use their hands a lot, like I do. I use my hands a lot. Setting clear and assertive boundaries and getting our needs met through communication. But at times we know where we are confronted with people who might not be as cool with being open and calm as we are, boy, that's when the problems kick in. We all know these folks, yeah, the challenging ones. So let's keep going. I know, Melvin, you might have me on spotlight, but I really want to be able to see the room. If we can open me up, thank you, because it allows me to see you all. All right, so before we get started, right out of the gate, we're already going. It's 9:10 this morning, and we are already hopping and going. So we're going to go into a Zoom room. And in the Zoom room, we're going to lay out the first foundation, which is really understanding. Good morning, Ruth. We are going to understand a little bit more about communicating with challenging people and why. What is the most concerning thing for you when you're dealing with challenging people through communication? So in the Zoom room, you're going to have about 11 minutes or so. Melvin will start doing the countdown to bring you back at 12 minutes. But assign a scribe in the room. Have somebody keep an eye on the time because you want this time to be really good. And then the proverbial spokesperson to be able to share back to the bigger room. Okay, so you're going into the Zoom room in a moment. You're going to be discussing what is the most concerning for you, because we want to make sure that we're talking about those things. The most concerning thing for you in communicating with challenging people and why that's so concerning. Melvin?
All right, all right. Okay, everyone, I'm going to go ahead and set you up into breakout rooms. You'll have about 4 to 5 people that are in those rooms. So there'll be a total of 6. Give you about 12 minutes, and I'll send you going in 3, 2, 1. See you back real soon.
Fantastic. Well, welcome back. I'm hoping that those conversations were rich and sharing and probably gets us started on this journey that we're going to have today around communicating with challenging people. So thank you, Jacqueline. So let's get into it. So the first group, I'm going to, Melvin, will you manage like the groups? Because I think you named them and you'll know who's in the rooms.
Yeah, so we got our first group, room 1. Those are the know-it-alls.
Oh.
So that'll be Carmen, Karen, Liliana, Susan, and Terry.
Wonderful. And don't get discouraged by the names. You're going to see these names come up later in the broadcast. So you'll get why we talk about that. But number 1, who's the spokesperson for that room?
Hi, that'd be me.
Oh.
Oh,
Wait a minute, which Liliana? Oh,
I saw Liliana hold her hand up, and then Karen started talking. So
It's because I think there's another Liliana, huh?
Yeah, so this is
Okay.
Karen Roseberry group.
Okay. All
Okay,
right.
thank you, Karen Roseberry.
Yes, hi.
Hi.
So we had a good conversation. We talked about some of the challenges of dealing with challenging people. Can be everything from the message and how that message is received and interpreted by the person, and how then they may also communicate that back out to others. And sometimes that can be challenging if they didn't receive the message in the manner in which it was intended, and then repeat a message in the manner in which it was not intended. We talked about knowing our audience and how they like to have the communication and the style that is there, so that hopefully we can overcome challenges. So if we know that someone is lighthearted, then to hopefully be able to communicate with them in that style, or if they need a more direct, straightforward and serious approach to be able to do so. Making sure that, just proper courtesies are entailed, and that we're speaking to them with a sensitivity for who they are, their identity, and the way in which they want to be referenced and referred. We talked about the fact that sometimes challenging people don't let you get a word in edgewise, and so that's very difficult in the communication process as well. And there's also a time and an oftenness with challenging people to at times distract the conversation and take it in directions that it was never intended to go, whether it's minute details, or whether it's just an irrelevant point of topic or conversation, or not getting the actual point of the communication and going off on rabbit trails that, again, are not relevant to why the discussion was being held. And those are basically kind of sum up probably the biggest challenges that we've seen in communicating with challenging people.
Wonderful. Thank you, Karen, for that really great summary. Really greatly appreciated. I jotted down some highlights that we'll talk about in just a moment. Melvin, group number 2.
All right, group number 2, the passive. So this is Liliana Escobar group.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. So when we were talking about, working or dealing with difficult people, we're really talking about, sometimes how we react to certain situations, how we come across, because everybody, like I said, sometimes every situation is different. When you're talking to somebody, there's somebody that might be upset for one reason, or they might have a certain kind of attitude. But I think that it's how we come across to those kind of people. We want to be sure that we, and it's for every situation as well. So we were talking about, I think, in certain situations, we don't want to enable others. We want to be able to, I guess, what they're going through, we want to be able to help them, and not enable them. But I think that it's also about, having that empathy too, having empathy when you're working with other people, knowing that, maybe they're having a challenging day.
Right.
Maybe something is going on with them, in their personal life. So we don't know we want to be able to be there to support them, but we also don't want to be like those enablers. We want to be, it's difficult dealing with difficult people, but it's like every situation I think is different. We're also talking about how we have so many different generations now. Everything is like, we have Gen Z, we have millennials, we have Gen X. So everybody has their own way of, how they come across. So it's about reading the person, for every situation as well, reading the person, what are they going through, how we can be there, but like I said, just knowing what the situation is. So I think that's it.
Wonderful. Really, really great insight again, Liliana. Thank you. And group 2, greatly appreciate it. I'm loving all of this. So this is just going to take us in great places for this session today. Number 3, Melvin.
All right, so group number 3, this is the Dictators. So this will be Kana, Keith, Mimi, and Sean Twain's group.
Why do I have to be the dictator?
Again, you'll see what this all means later on.
No worries. Yeah, we had a really good discussion. We kind of started off talking about different communication styles and how that can be challenging. A few of us in the room are new to the organization, so just learning how people communicate and overcoming those barriers with different communication styles from different people. And also how that can bring mixed messages. If you have a project and there's multiple voices who have opinions on that project and getting approval, and how do you communicate with them that this person wants this person wants this, and how can we, come to an understanding all together with lots of voices in the room. We also, Sean, who's in my group, he works in government, and oftentimes, people come at him already angry, already frustrated with the system, already, having all these experiences leading up to this conversation. So they come across really hostile, and that obviously is a very difficult situation to navigate and keep your cool in that situation. But, he had a really good point just saying that he tries to, like what was said before, empathize with them and realize, like, how would I feel if I was in this situation, understanding that, government comes with a lot of red tape, and that sometimes, you may not be able to fix their problem, and how do you talk about that, and how do you de-escalate when you can't actually help them. So I thought that was a really good point, because that's definitely a challenging situation. We also talked about, like, the communication online, like working remotely, and how that can be challenging. Like, should this be an email? Should this be a full-blown meeting? Like, should this be a Teams quick chat? Should this be an email? And how you kind of know where to go for different people. We also discussed kind of like what was said before, but body language, and kind of understanding, like, if someone's coming at you hostile or aggressive, you kind of are on high alert automatically, and that's never a good place to start a conversation, is when you're on high alert. Yeah, and then we kind of wrapped up with talking about not wanting to come across as the difficult one. Like Kymberly said, like, we might be the challenging person to communicate with, and we know that, and sometimes, not me, but other people in the room, being, a woman or a person of color, not wanting to come across as, bossy or assertive or, difficult in any sort of way. Like, how do you speak up without getting those labels attached to you, and making sure your voice is heard without coming across as the challenging communicator?
Wonderful, Mimi. Thank you so much for that. Really, really good insight with this group. Melvin, wow, I think we're just going to be done, Tracy, in a minute. Like, we'll be like, okay, so you all solved all of the things right here in your own Zoom room. We can just kick back and do something else. Melvin, next group, please.
All right, room number 4, the yes people. So that'll be Carlos, Diana, Fran, Genevieve, Lorita, and Tiara.
I'm Diana. I'm the one speaking for the group.
Yes.
We pretty well covered up like what everybody else has covered. We talked about knowing why if the person comes to you excited or upset or angry, it's more than likely something else has happened during the day to this person, and he's venting. So when to listen. One, to just listen and be that good listener and be there. Don't have to give advice. We don't have to resolve their problem. We just need to listen, and how to be able to do that. Then there are times when we're trying to speak and then somebody gets upset about something we said, and to apologize right away, to show that we are human. We make the mistakes. I didn't mean to say it in a way that was insulting to you. Let me try it again, because that certainly wasn't my intention. I respect you, and let people know that they are important, either to be heard or to be spoken to. It's important to have that communication. I think the value in other people is important for us. The empathy is really important for us to really understand where that person's coming from. The patience that requires you to be, one of the problems in being a listener is that somebody says something that pushes your button. And how to learn what those buttons are, and be able to stay calm, and be able to really just be able to listen and hear, and not take anything personally that's being thrown at you, but to just be open. You can learn so much more from somebody once you've listened and really heard where their point of view is coming from, than if you're trying to define your point of view and pressure your point of action of what you're trying to get across, but
Right.
just to really hear what somebody else is saying against that. So now we're pretty
Yeah.
much on line with everybody else.
Wonderful. Wow, Diana, that was so good. And you know, one of the things that you said that I just really resonated with me is that you've got to understand who you are too as a listener, right?
Mhm.
So making sure that you understand what your triggers are and what might set you off too in the conversation, because that can shut down communication before it even gets started sometimes. So I really appreciate that you highlighted that.
Mhm.
Wonderful work. Melvin.
Yes, room number 5, the no people. This will be Bertha, Elisa, Elvia, Jennifer, and Zonia.
Wonderful. Who's our spokesperson for that group? They had such a good conversation.
Hi.
They didn't get one. There's
We
Elvia.
we didn't, but I did notice that Jennifer was taking notes. I don't mind
Okay.
speaking on it. So
Okay.
Jennifer, in case I miss anything, we really talked about being self-aware and the cultural differences. Sometimes people may not be open to other perspectives. They may have preconceived ideas or beliefs, and because they have those ideas or beliefs, they may be loud, argumentative, aggressive. So being able to identify their attitude, personality, and work with them. But not only that, it also is about self-awareness. Are you the person bringing in that attitude, bringing in that challenging behavior that's causing them to be aggressive and assertive towards you? And then also being culturally tolerant, knowing that sometimes there are triggers that we may be causing them because of our cultural differences. So being aware of that really helps when working with challenging people, and that can be either with coworkers, with clients that we're working with the public. So really it's just about being self-aware. Jennifer, did I miss anything?
I think you got everything.
Wow, that was really great, Elvia. Really, really great work, team. You've got me. I think I've got all my papers. I'm writing like crazy. This is wonderful stuff. And I love that you asked that question. There's twofold there, Elvia, that you and your team came up with. One, is your attitude the issue? Is your attitude the issue? And that's that self-awareness that each one of the groups have kind of alluded to, is like, what's my stake in this communication? Because it's kind of difficult to communicate by yourself. So it does take two to tango, at least two. So I love that. And then the piece that you also brought up, Elvia, that was powerful for me, culturally tolerant. And the fact that you could have people who are coming to the table with just different experiences and backgrounds, even so much as if you come from a very tiny, small family, and everybody talks like this, and then you come up with a really big family and they're talking really loud. You're like, why are you screaming at me, right? You're like, I wasn't screaming. I was just talking, right? You might have run into those kinds of folks. I know I have in my life, and where you've gone into a dinner and everybody's talking really loud. My best friend, she has 9 sisters. I have all brothers. So she invited me one of the very first times we were kind of getting to know each other. And she said, come with me to brunch. I want you to meet my sisters. And I have to tell you, I have never been more freaked out in my life to hear 10 women all talking at the same time. I was like, oh, how do they ever figure this out? Like, how do they even know what they're talking about? And we were in a big booth at Dupar's, if you've ever been to Dupar's. And I was like in the corner, and I think I just continued to shrink. Like, I got so tiny. And then finally they noticed, like, what's wrong with her? And my best friend was on the end, and she knew right away. And she's like, we probably are overwhelming her a little bit. And she was absolutely right. So I love that you brought that out, that cultural difference. It could be all kinds of things. It could be gender, it could be orientation, it could be color, it could be upbringing, it could be background, it could be everything. So thank you for bringing that out, Elvia. That was really powerful for me. Melvin, do we have another group?
Yeah, our final group is room 6. This is the Grippers, and that will be Denise, Deyusef, Diana, and Flora.
Wonderful.
Hi, good morning.
Morning.
I'm Flora. I'll speak for the team. We had many similar items that we talked about with the other groups. One thing that I did notice is that for like challenging conversations, we can be like a little avoidant. We don't want to really have that conversation, but we will go into it with more like a positive outlook or meet them where they're at, reading where that person's at. Also, go in there intentionally to listen. So really listening, make that effort to understand what they're trying to convey, putting more like, I guess we like putting their needs first. We're already aware that they're having a difficult time. So those are just some of the things that came up in our conversation.
Thank you, Flora. I really love that you said meeting people where they are and going into the conversation intentional, like going in saying, we're going to solve this. Because you know that little self-talk you do, when you, especially when it's a difficult conversation. The last one group said, about that avoidance, right? Like, oh, I've got to have, especially if you're a supervisor and you know that you've got to write somebody up or have a very intense corrective conversation. You go into this conversation and you're dreading it already. You're like, oh, I think a lot of times we don't always think about how difficult it is on the other side too, because you're ramping yourself up. Well, that anxiety that's building. You know how it feels, it's building and it's building. And then you go in because you're nervous, and depending upon what your styles are and how you're hardwired, your communication can definitely be impacted by that, right? Just by that energy that you're bringing. So I always tell people, breathe, maybe write some notes a little bit, just so to keep you on track. Somebody else said about, being careful not to be distracted in the conversation. So maybe taking some notes just so that you have them. I wouldn't say a script, unless it's really something that is way out of your wheelhouse and you really need to have some guardrails put up. But I always say throw the script out, because if you have a script, you're not listening. I'm going to say it again. If you have a script, you're not listening. So if you already have, okay, I'm going to say this, and then they're probably going to say that, and then I'm going to say this, and then they're going to say that. Like, you've already answered for them, and that may not be the answer that's going on, but you don't even hear it, right? Because you're so busy thinking about my next line. So we've got to be very present. Many of you all said this. Your comments just wowed me. And I'm going to be weaving these in, because this is why we had this as our first exercise, because it really does build on what's coming. Melvin, let's go to the screen. Excellent work, everyone. These challenging folks, oh, challenging. Let's see who they are. Now you see where we're coming from. We've got a few people, and you might know some of these people, or you may be that person. So we've got something called the righteous. Roy or Renee the righteous. They're also known as better than everybody else. One-uppers, like, oh, I had vanilla ice cream last night. Oh, I had vanilla ice cream that was flown in specifically from Italy on a private jet. And then they spoon-fed it to me on a gold spoon. What about yours? Was it thrifty? What was it? Or the show-offs. Oh my gosh, look at me, 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 right? You know those folks. Like, look at me, right? The big spotlight on me all the time. Yeah, you know this person. Renee the righteous. Let's keep going, Melvin. Let's see who else we get to know. Could be some of these challenging people. Carrie the closed off. Very passive pushover. Carrie, you jump, right? You don't carry. The yes people. These are the yes people. Yes, 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 yes. Sure, sure, sure. Now, what's the trouble with that? Well, sometimes with these folks, what they will do is they will say yes and yes and yes and yes, but they really in their head go, no, 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 maybe, maybe, no. I call that willful confusion. That's what that is, willful confusion. I'm going to, but I'm not. And then what do they say to their girlfriends or their friends or their coworkers? Like, yeah, well, he said this. And I was like, yeah, okay, but I'm not going to do that. Danger, danger. They don't contribute much, but all around us, they let everybody else maybe even do some of the hard work. You know that person, especially when you have a team group that you're doing some teamwork. The person, Fran, you know that person that sits over in the corner and goes, yeah, this is good, this is good, this is good, this is good. And you're like, come on, don't you have any input here? Donna, you're shaking your head. You know who I'm talking about. They're like, yeah. I get it. This person, although on the surface doesn't seem as aggressive as perhaps Renee Roy, the righteous, certainly there's some passive aggressive stuff that goes on with this person. So you just beware. Next slide, Melvin. Ooh, did you hear that? Alex, be angry. Always mad. Alex is always mad. You could be about to tell Alex something good and Alex is mad. Alex is always mad. They also called tanks. Wonder why? Like the big tanks, war tanks. They are explosive. They're really a hot handful. They really are. And so bossy. Oh my goodness. Well, you know what you should have done? Anybody that starts off with that sentence is already a challenge, right? Well, what you should have done, you know that. All you have to do is, that's another one. All you have to do is, now you know what that means. Like, why couldn't you think of this, Diana? Like, why couldn't you think of it? Because all you have to do is, right, Genevieve? So Alex the Angry, the challenge, I mean, there's so many challenges with Alex the Angry, but the big one is that you never know what the degree of anger is. Like, you know there's going to be anger, and you know there's going to be some explosiveness, but you just don't know the degree of it. Like, what's the temperature for Alex today? How intense is Alex going to be? Are they going to blow up? Are they going to be bossy, just kind of nitpicky? Bertha, like, how is that going to show up? So you're always trying to figure out how to dodge and dash. So remember, we talked a few minutes ago about having some anxiety about having the conversation, or, you know, maybe even falling victim to avoidance. Like, who wants to that? Like, nobody wants that. So I think one of the groups said, like, you got to figure out maybe which type of communication you want to do. I think Mimi said it. So, you know, is this a Teams chat? Is this an email? Is it a text message? Is it a call? Is it a visual call? Is it an in-person thing? Like, you're grappling. You're like, what? How do I try to manage any of these kinds of challenging people? You do have more than ever lots of different portals to use for communication now. It used to just be a phone call or an in-person, which I think is a little bit more stressful sometimes too, right? Because that's head-on direct communication. You didn't have all these other neat ways like a text message to do this. Like, hey, Alex, how are you today? Good morning. And you're hoping that just softens them up just enough to get your point through. But Alex is a toughie. That's a toughie. Let's keep going, Melvin. And then you got negative Nancy, negative Nathan. No. Like, I'm coming in, I've got this wonderful idea. Oh, Nancy, here it is. And she's like, yeah, that's never gonna work. I don't know why you thought that. Nope. So let me show you what you did wrong. Let me show you how this is never gonna, wish you'd talk to me about this first, because this is never gonna fly, Denise, never gonna fly. Or they complain. They always have something to say, Elvia. They always have something to say. They are critiquing everything, sometimes not even verbally. Have you ever known that person, that negative Nancy? Have you known them, Keith, that just does it with a look? Huh. There's always that proverbial, huh. They're super difficult to communicate with, and they are almost impossible to please. Even if you do it exactly the way they asked you to do it. And you even confirm, so you want me to do A, B, C, D, E, F. Yep, that's what I want you to do. And then when you give it to them, Denise, bam. No, I want an HIJK-L-M-N-O-P. Don't you know? Negative Nancy's, negative Nathan's. They're a downer. They suck the life out of you. They're energy vampires. They really are. They'll take it out of you. Don't let it happen. Don't let it happen. I'm going to show you how to get around that. Melvin, look at that. Ooh, negative. So, okay, let's take a big deep breath. We've been together for 50 minutes now. Seems like longer, doesn't it? I know we've been really getting into this information. So now we're going to talk about how we maneuver through this. We're going to go back into a Zoom room and we're going to ask these questions. We're going to ask what makes communication so difficult, and we're going to assign you. Oh, Melvin's already done it, actually. He's already assigned you. How brilliant is he? With your tag. Now you see how that all played, right? So we're going to ask you about that particular style that is your group. If you're negative Nancy, I don't know if we had any negative Nancy's yet. Melvin will reel those through. But we're going to ask you, what's so difficult? What's so difficult about dealing with a know-it-all? Like, why is that so hard? Or the passives? And then what are your reactions to that personality type? Many of you said that in your first Zoom sessions, that got to check yourself and make sure that you're not reacting to things just because you're not. If you came from, let's say, an upbringing where you had a pretty critical parent, right? Or a taskmaster parent, you may be overly sensitive to anything that maybe remotely sounds like criticism, right? Because your family is your first organization. It's your very first one. It's the one you learn how to work in teams. It's the one you learn how to negotiate. It's the one that you learn how to manage communication styles, is when you're born into that group or raised by that group. And so you learn what works and you figure out what works at a pretty early age. We don't change much from a style perspective or a style preference from what we had earlier, how we react to things. And so this will be great to think about what's the outcome of the interaction that you might have, what you hope to have, and what you probably will have when you're dealing with one of those things. So I'm going to go over to the chat really quickly because I want to see what Melvin put in here. And then Melvin, you've got here. Okay, so the know-it-alls is room 1. The passives are room 2. The passives, remember that one? The dictators are 3, which are kind of like the angry Alex. The yes people, the yes, 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 yes. And then room 5 are the no, no, no's, the negative no, no, no's. And then 6 are the gripers. And we didn't talk about them yet, but the gripers are the ones that just kind of nitpick, right? Like, I don't know why we have to do this. Probably you're thinking this right now. Why do we have to go in the Zoom room again, Kymberly? Again, we've only been together for 50 minutes. You're going in there again. That's a griper. So if you were already doing that, I see you. I see you a whole lot. So Melvin, why don't you finish the instruction and get them going?
Absolutely. So I'll go ahead and set you up in your breakout rooms. You have your group names, and we'll see you back in about 10 to 12 minutes. All right, here we go.
And everything's closing now.
Lovely. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. I cannot wait to hear hear your insights. So if you recall, Melvin, if you wouldn't mind putting up the screen with the questions, that way that will jog us through. And what I'd like to do this time, just for the sake of time, is maybe if you can give me one big highlight for each question, that will get us flowing a little bit quicker. So let's go on in. So the first question is, what makes communication so difficult with the personality type that was assigned to you? So Melvin, let's go in reverse order this time. Let's not start with the first, let's go from the back to the first.
All right, so let's start with the gripers.
The gripers. So, yang, 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 yang. Oops. Let's hear from that group. Who's the spokesperson for the gripers?
I'm the spokesperson again for the gripers, the nitpickers.
Okay. Yes.
The pessimistics.
Yes, yes,
yes. What we decided, I thought was, I feel like our group, how I feel is that when you go into situations, it's more of a positive outlook. So just like communicating with that griper or nitpicking person, what we said we would do is kind of bounce it back into their court. Like use open-ended questions like, okay, how would you go about this situation then? Or what are your, because if they're already negative about what we're saying, we ask questions like, how would you do it instead? And use some of their comments to pull back and gear them in the direction of a positive solution or working towards a solution. So it might not be the solution we thought we were going to get, but it will be working together to meet in towards a positive ending
Wonderful, Flora. That's really great. So take a collaborative approach and use some of theirs. I wouldn't acquiesce all power, right? I would want to make sure that we maintain whatever it is, but at least you're including them in that. And what I like to do with those kinds of folks, and this is a question I always use, is in a perfect world, what would that look like for you? Whatever it is, like in a perfect world, what would it look like? So that way you can kind of see, and then you can kind of even follow that up with well, yeah, boy, that would be great. But since we don't live in a perfect world, how can we get this for today? Like, how can we net this out? So then that way they at least feel heard, because I would lay to bet that people who are this kind of gripey nitpicker, I always like to understand the genesis of where this comes from. And I would probably bet that at some point in their universe, they probably didn't feel heard. And so this is a power move for them to be able to feel heard. And it's just not, it doesn't come off as well as we'd like to see it, Flora, but we can at least acknowledge the fact that you need to be seen and heard. And so the question around what would perfect look like? Because if you've got somebody that's always thinking like nitpicking, have they ever been satisfied with anything? So it's a wonderful way to say, if you had all bets are off and you had everything you could ever want, what could that be? Okay, so that's a good tip. So thank you for bringing that out. Melvin?
Our next group is the no people.
The no people.
All right.
No.
Hi, we did lose a member from our group. She did have to leave, so I don't mind being our spokesperson again.
Thank you.
So really what makes communication difficult with this personality type is that they are super difficult to communicate with. They are extremely judgmental. They complain, they judge, even if they don't know it, they judge through their silence. And me personally, I have dealt with this. I did grow up in that kind of household. So in the past, my reaction would be just to cry. Yeah. I would cry a lot as a kid. Now, what I find that works with this type of personality is not really proving them wrong, but giving them the statistics, giving them facts, giving them the references. Where did I obtain this information? And backing myself up so that they don't almost like judge you. Like they really have no choice but to take your word on what you're saying because you've provided them that information. And at work, like I have encountered people like that. And I think that also works well with the public. Just, providing that information, being 100% sure of what you're saying so that they can't be judgmental or even just calling them out. Letting them know, hey, your silence, like what you're doing right now, your body language, you're judging me. So I think, definitely calling them out works best.
I appreciate that. And I appreciate that you said fight with facts, because it's hard to dispute facts. And so, and usually when you do that, maybe once, maybe twice, sometimes it takes up to 5 times, you'll see them lessening some of that judgmentalness because they're like, okay, she's coming prepared. She's coming with the facts. So I don't like the way that feels when she counters with the facts. So I probably going to lessen some of this. So that's exactly right. And I think calling them out is good. Now, where we get into a bit of a rub, we have to be careful, is not to use the you words, right? So use the words like, when I see this kind of behavior, it makes me feel like. So, because if you've got that kind of person, they're going to jump to the defense and they won't hear you. So it's really important to always be able to speak in the language that people are giving you so that you can be heard. It's really more your own gift versus anything else. We want to make sure that you're being heard all the time. And if you start jumping on them, let me tell you, somebody like a negative Nancy, negative Nathan, or even angry Alex is going to come at you and they're not going to see you anymore. Like they kind of get into that blind rage, and they're just going to be trying to prove their points. So really great points there. Thank you for that, Elvia. Melvin?
All right, and next we have the yes people.
Hello. So the yes people, we thought that a lot of times that they were people pleasers and they can't say no, and maybe they're doing that to avoid conflict and they don't want to really stir the pot. We don't think that they're committed, or it might be hard to see where they stand on topics because they're not going to really give their actual opinion. They're just going to agree with everybody else. And they might have too much on their plates as well, because they're going to just take on too many tasks because they don't want to say no. We might not want to ask them to be part of projects because we won't get the input that we would necessarily need for that project. And it's hard to trust that they're going to do what they say, because maybe how are we going to know if they take on so much?
Right.
And then we think that what would the outcome be is that we would need to ask them to elaborate on reasons for why they're saying yes, and what they plan to do. Ask them like more open-ended questions to gain participation.
I love that, Genevieve. Thank you so much. I love those comments, especially around, the danger of this. The danger is that you might not want them to be on projects anymore. And so what you have to do is share that with them. Like, I really value you. I think you could really bring something pretty special to this group, but we need all hands on deck. We need everybody to participate. And because you remember, style is different for everyone. So where we have to be careful about that is that maybe my style is just never going to feel comfortable saying something out loud. So maybe asking them, how would you like to participate in this? So maybe they want to email it. Maybe they want to do it one-on-one. Maybe they want to do it in a private chat, because some people just react and have discussions in different ways. So, and they can contribute big time. We have people on our team, on my team that I manage, and there are a couple people who really do prefer one-on-one private time. They contribute they give me so much, but that's just their way. And when they're in a group, they just go, yeah, that sounds good, because they're not hardwired to, or even feel maybe even empowered to be able to really feel like they can contribute out loud. And what I have found is when you allow them their own way to contribute, you can almost see the confidence changing. And before you know it, especially if you're a good facilitator in a group work, you might say, boy, Marcy gave me these great ideas, and I just want to make sure that everyone hears her ideas too. And then you share it for her. And then you can even say, Marcy, is there anything I left out? And she may say, oh yeah, blah, 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 right? And then you're beginning to bring her in where she feels like that. Sometimes the yes, yes, yeses have heard no, no, no's a lot. There's a kinship between yes, yes, yesers and no, no, noers. And so maybe if they grew up with a no personality, or their boss is a no personality, they just figure the easiest way is to just go, yeah. So this one is probably got a little bit more teeth in it that maybe you can actually have an impact on. So thank you, Genevieve, for bringing those things up. Melvin?
Yeah, so our next group will be the Dictators.
Alex the angry dictators. And what do they have to say for themselves?
Alex the Dictator is my least favorite person to deal with.
Yes.
And our group kind of all came to the consensus that we turn into the yes, yes, yes person, even if that's not how we normally are. But when an angry Alex comes to us, we don't want to stir the pot. We kind of just sit back and like, yep, even if we disagree with what they're saying, and I know that's not necessarily a good thing. I'm just realistically, that's what we came to decide. That's what happens to us when we're approached with an angry Alex. But Sean had some really good input. He said that he normally will kind of just let them vent and kind of sit back and do some active listening and let them de-escalate themselves, let them wear themselves out, get it all out, and then kind of be like, okay, so how can we help? Once they come back down to your level, then you can start to talk to them and rationalize with them. And one really good point that he had is if someone's coming with you and they're frustrated about a certain thing or angry about, a systematic thing, just reminding them that it's normal. And that oftentimes will help people feel better about any given situation, that, oh, they're not alone, or we're not singling you out for whatever reason. This is just a normal way the system works, and reminding them of that. So I thought that was good, but just we don't have answers. That's just kind of what we talked about.
No, it's very good. This one is one of those, it's a difficult one. This is really the ultimate difficult and challenging person, right? because if you've got barriers of rage or barriers of anger, it makes it really, really difficult to get through that. And you have to figure out kind of how you maneuver through that. And I think you said Sean just kind of lets them play it out. I think maybe some of the angry people that I've worked with before, I don't think they get tired. I think it only actually increases their anger when you're not doing anything. They're just like, what are you looking at? Why are you just not saying anything, right? You probably heard that. So I think you have to become, and we'll talk about this in a little while, even getting to the point where you say, this is probably not the best day for us. And when someone's very loud, the best response is always the quiet response, where you're actually very quiet in your speech. So if they're yelling, and then you say, okay, so let's keep talking. One, it just ticks them off because you've not bit the bug, right? You've not bit into their rage. And then number two, sometimes it does allow people to get down a beat or two. And then you can even say at that point, that's the negotiation point, like, David, it is probably just not a good day for us. And so this is an important topic. It's not going to go away, but maybe we need to come back and figure out a different way to approach this. And that could be even written. Sometimes it's better to deal with an angry person through written form. Because you get your words out, you get what needs to be said, and then sometimes, and not all the time for sure, but once they see what you were trying to say because they couldn't hear it through their rage, then they go, oh, is that what you wanted? And they may say, yeah, go ahead, or sounds like a good idea, or whatever. But different people respond to different types of communication styles. So maybe the person who just is not a good in-person person, right? Maybe they're better through written form. So just looking for that, and at least being able, you being the bigger person, you being able to be in control of it, because sometimes that's all that anger and bluster and stuff is actually, guess what, a distractor. Because I don't want to have this conversation. So if I get really loud and get very big, you're going to stop. Like, you're going to say, never mind, forget it. That's why I said it's important to say to them, we'll come back to this. It's important, and this is going to, we need to get this solved for, but maybe not today. Maybe not in this moment even. I've done it where I've said, let's take a 15-minute timeout and let's come back together at 11 o'clock. And let's try to. So sometimes they can go into their own psyche and go, okay, I'm being kind of a jerk here. So that's good. Thank you, Mimi. Greatly appreciate it. That was a tough one. Yeah. Melvin?
All right. And our next group is the passives.
Oh, that's another tough one. Equally tough. Passives. Who has that one?
I'll go.
Okay.
So yeah, so this was a difficult one because we all came up, as a team, we said that this was a team. This was the type of person that it's like they don't speak up. During meetings, they're passive. They don't they don't try to come up with situations. So I mean, with how to deal with the situation, solutions. And so they're probably the ones that are, they don't say anything at a meeting, but then they're the ones that are, like at their desk, at the lunchroom, they're like, oh, this is this and this and this, they have a problem with something, but they didn't speak up during that meeting. So what we think is that maybe coming up with different things, like that they can share what they're feeling. Maybe they're comfortable with one-on-ones. Maybe they are comfortable writing an email. Because like I said, not everybody feels comfortable speaking up during meetings for a lot of people. So I think that that's a way that we can kind of work with them, is maybe find how we can get them to speak up, how they can come up with solutions. So the outcomes, we had a difficult time. We didn't really know what we could do for an outcome with these kinds of people, because it's hard. It's hard when somebody is passive.
Yeah, it is. It's very hard when somebody's passive. And I think you brought up some really good solutions though, Liana. I want to make sure that we highlight that, because, really try to get in there to find out what's underneath the hood. Kind of almost the same thing that we said about the other one a few minutes ago. What did you want? What do you want? Because sometimes I do throw it out, especially if they have been out having lots of conversations about what's going on, but they're not participating in it. I'll say, gosh, I heard a couple of things that was it was a little upsetting to me, because you had opportunity to share those thoughts and feelings in the room, and you chose to do it outside of the room. Why is that? Do you not feel safe in the room? Do you not trust us in the room, right? Your voice matters, but you can only be impactful if we do it here in the room. So then that way they understand, like, we're not trying to censor you about what you might be saying out there, but bring it here, because this is where we're problem solving, right? And your voice does matter. So that way they understand, like, oh, first of all, I've just been called out. But then second, more important, okay, maybe they do want to hear from me. I didn't think they did, but maybe they do. So that's kind of the way I would solve for that. Excellent points, Liliana. Melvin.
All right, and finally, the ones that know it all, the know-it-alls.
The know-it-alls. All right, what do you got to say for yourselves, know-it-alls?
All right. Well, we lost a couple of people in our group, but those of us that were still there were able to definitely draw from kind of our collective experience.
Yes.
I think we've all kind of had an individual like that or two in groups, and so we kind of pulled from our tool belt a little bit. And some of the same skills that have been discussed are used, I think, with them as well. Letting them talk, letting them get out just all of the wealth of their knowledge can sometimes be very helpful. And, hopefully not quite becoming the yes person, but kind of like sometimes with those dictators, that can be sort of the easy approach of dealing with them. Yet, hopefully we don't fall into that too much, because sometimes there are some gaps in their knowledge that they haven't really thought about. So after letting them talk, sometimes even sort of leading from behind, let them, kind of maybe even, take that role, so that they feel as though that, that they're able to impart that wealth of knowledge that they have, but then kind of coming along and asking questions to help fill those gaps and those voids that maybe weren't quite comprehensive in the skill set or the knowledge base that they brought, or that they thought that they brought.
Yeah.
So, like I said, I think letting them talk is probably key, so that they can kind of, unload that. And then, looking to the places where there still are those gaps, asking questions to hopefully fill those, and letting them know that, that they are heard. And sometimes that pause, though, is good, not so much in that we need to always like revisit it, per se, but at least letting them know, let me think about that. You've provided me with a lot of information. Let me process that, and I'll get back to you. And then you can kind of set it on your time to hopefully shift the conversation back over to the points of conversation and topics that are maybe even a little more relevant, because sometimes those know-it-all people believe that their particular kind of unique skill set or their subject matter of expertise is the only one that matters for the big picture. And so it's kind of opening that up so that there can be multiple voices heard on the subject.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And there, through all of that know-it-allness, there's probably some good information in there. It's just that they overwhelm you with it, and you have no way to put in your pieces to it. So I like the fact that you say, okay, let's maybe reestablish it. So that way they've got their information out, but then reestablish, reset, and then kind of set the tone so that now you can be together and be more collaborative in the conversation. It's difficult, a know-it-all, boy, just by their own nature, they're exclusionary. And we're talking about inclusionary conversations. They're exclusionary just by the way that they wield their know-it-allness, if that makes any sense. So it really does, it can prove to be a challenge, and it's certainly a derailer in progress. And you can turn yourself, do you see how all of these kind of interact depending upon one chess move against the other chess move? So if this is a know-it-all person or an Alex angry person, it can turn you into a yes person or a passive person, right? Because everyone's role is kind of moving around. So that's why understanding, we kind of do it in jest, but understanding how very quickly the tide can change in a conversation or in a communication, and be more aware about, oh, I just moved from my position. My position was this, and I allowed this difficult or challenging person to actually move me outside of what I planned to do. And now I'm taking a more passive role. or I'm taking a role that has now created me to be angry, because it can happen, right? You know, if you've got someone who has just been a know-it-all, can turn you into an angry Alex. Because you're just like, stop. And yes, Elvia, you can be more than one personality type. You can be multiple personalities depending upon, and I think someone said it when we did the opening Zoom room, depending on what the situation is, you may shapeshift and become one of these, and then maybe in another conversation, you're a different one. Right? So it's a moving dervish role here. We can be, and sometimes even in the same conversation, we can actually change. You know, we can start off angry, or they can start off angry, and then through, you know, really smart facilitation, they can switch over and become more positive and more interesting into the conversation. So thank you for playing this out with us, Melvin. Next slide, please. So, trying to change people. Well, we know how that works out, don't we? Like, you just can't. But that doesn't mean that you have to accept bad behavior either. So remember, the more we try to change them, the more they might start to resent us or even dig their heels in to those, you know, mores, which are their difficult behavior patterns. So what do we do then, Melvin? Okay, so one of my favorite quotes ever is, we don't learn from talking, we learn from listening. And many of you said this in your Zoom rooms around active listening and being a good listener. It is the genesis of good communication, is listening. And if you're already coming to the table knowing what you're going to say, and you're already thinking about how you're going to counter the sentence that is being talked about right in that moment, you're not listening. You're not listening. The other thing about that is we all think we are so good at multitasking. I got a little news hint for you. We're not. We are terrible at multitasking. We think because we've got action going on, like, oh, look at me, I can type, I'm listening, I'm doing a webinar, like I'm doing all these things all at one time. About 6% of you is getting a little bit of each one of those things. Have you ever just became very present for people? Very, very present, just slowing it down. And I know we've got all this technology, especially if you're working remote or do a lot of virtual work. You probably, Elvia, are probably like, oh, I'm gonna look at my phone. I can text at the same time. I'm listening to her, but I can text. Or hey, no, that's not how it works, is it? Because I'm getting a part. And how many times does it happen where you'll go, wait, what? What did you just say? It's because it caught up to you, right, Denise? You're like, wait a second. My husband does that to me all the time. I think I'm speaking from what I know here. I will, you know, he's telling me something, you know, something happened in his day, and I'm texting, I'm catching up to emails. And then there'll be one little thing, or sometimes he embeds it on me. He does, Diana. He'll say, and then I'm going to divorce you and move to Italy. And I'll be like, wait, what did you say? Now you got my attention. But for the most part, I'm like, yeah, I kind of got parts of it. So this listening thing, boy, is it important. It's the number one step in dealing with challenging people. Because here's the universal truth. Everyone wants to feel heard. I'm going to repeat that. Everyone wants to feel heard. Everyone. No progress can take place until the other person feels acknowledged. Their point of view, their intelligence, their perspective has been acknowledged. And you do that through shaking your head, leaning in. I understand. Oh, yes, I understand exactly what you mean. That's being acknowledged. That's what it feels like. Think about the best conversation you ever had. The best conversation you ever had. That's right, listening and hearing is not the same. Very present, where you actually put your pen down, your phone down, even if you've got to manage yourself, Donna, to the point where you put your phone in a drawer somewhere to be very present. The richness of that conversation, Flora, is mind-blowing. It becomes such a richer exchange, Fran. It really becomes now about you and me. And me cueing into your verbals, your nonverbals, me leaning in, me accepting the information that you give, me having counter conversations. I'm not saying you have to take it in and you don't have a counter sentence. You might. But that counter is even more fulfilled because you've heard what the person has said and you go, yeah, Denise, I really understand exactly what you mean by that. Ba, 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 ba. And then the other person's like, yeah, you get it. Spending 3 minutes of being very present and listening, really listening to what someone is saying, is more powerful than 10 minutes of you being distracted, multitasking, and not being present. Many people have said that have met Barack Obama, famous people and non-famous people, the one comeback people say, even if it's in a moment, just 1 minute, is that you feel like you're the most important person in that one moment that you had with him. That's a gift. Now, you know the man has probably got 90 million things on his mind, but he has figured out that let me give this person me for this one moment. So they really feel seen, heard, and appreciated. The power behind that is really stark. So while you're listening, really focus on what the other person is saying, not what you want to say next. Yeah, but. Did you even hear anything I said? You have your own agenda. Keep going, Melvin. We don't learn from talking, we learn from listening. So when a situation, if you're dealing with our Alex, our wonderful Alex, angry Alex, when a situation is emotionally charged, it's easy to get caught up in the heat of the moment. We all know that, don't we? Anybody ever tried to call DirecTV or Spectrum? AT&T? Oh boy. Or worse yet, an airline when your luggage has been lost. Anybody ever done that? Have that conversation? You know how mad you get. So it's easy to get caught up in the moment. So monitor your breathing. You can almost literally feel your heart rate changing in those conversations, can't you? You can almost feel it. Monitor your breathing. It seems hokey. I know it does. I always thought that was the hokiest thing. I was like, monitor my breathing, until I finally did it in the heat of a moment. And I was like, wow, did that really set me right? I needed that moment. I needed to allow oxygen in. I needed to have that moment where my shoulders weren't all hunched up. I needed to bring those down, and I needed to take some slow, deliberate, deep breath before I say anything. Get that one time to find your center and to stay calm in this conversation. And that's important. Somebody's got to do it in the conversation, or else it's going to go off the rails. So keep going, Melvin. So be careful not to judge. We got to be careful too, because we can't be coming off all high and mighty, Keith. We cannot do it. So you don't know what the other person's going through. And someone said that in the early ones, and I wanted to make sure that we highlight that. Let's face it, the last 2.5 years have been a show. Has this not been a show? No one ever could have been prepared for what we've lived through in the last 2.5 years. I mean, on your scale of wonder what's going to happen in my life, did you ever think that for almost a complete year, you almost never left your house? You never would have thought it. So we are all going through things. We're dealing with stuff that we have not had to deal with. We're dealing with the pandemic. We're dealing with the hoping we don't catch COVID. We're hoping that our families are safe. We're not been able to travel. We have not been able to go see people who matter to us. We have had to grieve on a Zoom call. We have had to get married on a Zoom call. We've had to witness the first grandchild being born and seeing their face on a Zoom call. We're all dealing with a lot of things. Inflation is going up, up, up. At one point this summer, gas prices were almost $10 a gallon. Our money hasn't changed, but everything else has. The grocery store. The things that used to give us joy. I was talking to someone the other day and they said, I've lost my joy. Now, before, that would have been a pretty dramatic statement. And now people are like, yeah, I know, me too. So people are going through a lot. And so we have to take that into account, especially when we know what people have gone through. But we also have to, and I'm going to say this again, we have to assume that whoever it is we're coming into contact with is going through something. That awareness, that empathetic awareness has to kick in now more than ever. This is why you're seeing road rage. This is why you see people losing their Kool-Aid in grocery stores over nothing. Over nothing. Why did you put that there? And you're like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do it. Because everybody's on edge. So chances are, if a person is acting unreasonable, they're likely feeling some sort of vulnerability or fear. Something's going on. So that's when I always, and I do this unflailingly, I always stop the conversation and say, how are you doing today? Let me tell you something. Especially through Zoom or Teams or whatever you're using that's a virtual platform, we have forgotten the niceties of things. Remember when we used to all work in the office all the time, always, and we'd pop into each other's offices and we'd say, good morning. Remember those days? People would be walking down the aisles. They say, good morning, how are you? Hey, Mary, hi, Joe, how was the weekend? Da, 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 da. We don't have all that. So what we've done, Tiara, is we will log on and we go, so the first thing on the list, wait, what? The first thing on the list, good afternoon. And I stop people, my team will tell you that's on here. I'll say, well, first of all, good morning, good afternoon, how are you? You doing well? You look great. But when we dive in and jump in and all of these things, wowzer, we really do create these opportunities to have negative conversations. So let's keep going. I love this woman's face more than I can even tell you. She's judgy or what? So the world of communication, wow, somebody asked it a moment ago and said, can you be more than one? I think it was Alvia. Like, can you have more than one style? You bet you can. You bet you can. Because the world of communication is bigger than we even think about. There's all these techniques of communication. First of all, there's so many portals. There's so many portals. Thank you, Karen. I really appreciate that. There's so many portals to communicating now. We've never had this many before. To be able to text. Okay, so I'm going to confess something. You're not going to believe it. No one ever believes this about me. You've been with me now for an hour and 37 minutes. I'm going to tell you a secret. I'm an introvert. Yeah, I really am. Like, I'm a bona fide introvert. Where I am most happy is in the corner in my home by myself and not talking to anyone. Yeah, that's my truth. I process internally. I really like to have an opportunity to think about things before I say them out loud. But my universe requires me to be something different. I chose a job that requires me to be out loud. How about that? So what that means is I'm working against type is what we call it. We're working against type. If I'm a natural I'm a natural introverted person, then, I got to tell you, it is really a difficult thing to do. So we have to make sure that in our communication styles and how we do things, we have to be really careful about making sure that we're taking into account all of the different ways that we can communicate and how we can do these flexing and communications and how we manage conflict and how we pick the way we can do it. We get to choose how we communicate with people. That's the thing, that's the beauty of it all, is we get to choose it. So if you don't take away anything from this whole conversation that we've had today, and it's been a rich one, I have loved every single second of this time. I could be with you all like the rest of the week and talk about this, because this is a subject that I think is what's sorely missing from so many places, is how to deal with not just difficult people, but challenging people. How do we deal with myself when I'm a challenging person? Tact is the first one. Being tactful, being diplomatic, being credible. And I'm going to tell you the other secret sauce to this is, how do I become curious? What makes Flora tick? How do I get the best out of the Flora conversation? How do I really connect with Diana? I want to connect with Diana. How do I find how to do that? So let's just make sure that we understand that this is really critical. on how we begin to flex this communication style that we're all thinking about. So I'm going to pause here, and I'm going to ask for if anyone has any questions or thoughts before we close up today.
If you wanted to take yourself off mute, please do so. Or if you want to place your question, comment in the chat, please do so as well.
So I just want to say a comment on your comment on just going straight to the agenda and skipping the greeting and like the how you're doing. That also happens in email too.
Yes, it does.
Which is hard.
Yes, it is. We treat email like it's the shopping list that we didn't want to make. Right? So it's like, so let me get to the point. Let me give you the bullets. Let me do that. And then no closing, like no goodbye, no hello. You know, it doesn't take much more characters to type greetings, good morning, how are you? It just doesn't. And the tone, the tonality of email is even harder because there's no inflections there. Right? So you can be, you know, very, and you have to let people know, like, because I'm that way, Tara, I'm going to admit, my emails are pretty short. They're pretty concise. And so I always have to let people know, like, please don't take this, you know, don't take it the wrong way. Like, I'm answering you and I want to give you the bullets. And I'm usually going to say, how about we meet? Like, how about we talk about this more, right? But you're right. And then the long email that no one's ever going to read, right? So let me just say that again. Your long email, nobody's reading it. Like, nobody's reading it. They're just not. Okay, so like for real, they don't read it. And so then when you get frustrated because you're like, well, it was in the email. Well, which page? Was it on page 9 or was it around the 11th page? Because I didn't get it. Was it the 7 million bullet points? Like, which one is it? So there it is. So I just want you to know, concise but kind. Concise but kind. Be kind, because a bad email will get a bad email back. Because, you know, you went into that rage typing. Anybody do that? Rage typing? I can't be the only one. But save it to draft. Don't send that. Like, for real. Send it to draft. Come back and read it and you're like, who wrote that? Great question. Great comment, Tiara. Any other questions? I'm loving the comments here. Sharing about Grammarly. I love Grammarly. It's great. I love, oh, thank you, Terry. That's very kind. I'm glad to see a repeat person in here. Wonderful. Well, and I love the comment, Bertha. Thank you. I believe in I am because we are. Isn't that great? Untu is great. Any other comments before we close out? I have enjoyed this time like nothing, like nobody's business. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, you can always reach me through Tracy, and we'll make sure that we get any answers taken care of. I know we can't solve all the world's problems with dealing with difficult and challenging people, but we sure can give a shot to it. We can certainly give our best, and we can certainly remember that communication is two-way, okay? Have an amazing Tuesday. Thank you, Elvia.
Thank you so much. Kymberly, if we can give her a virtual or an actual round of applause. We appreciate her time. She is a part of Children's Bureau, which this was brought to you by Children's Bureau and Best Start. So we appreciate her. And if I can just take just 1 more minute of your time left, if everyone can see my screen. Group site, I know some of you have been answering the group site questions. Please take a moment to go there to answer. You can also put your own questions. We love to hear from you. We want to know how the Policy Leadership Academy is contributing to you and what you're learning, and if you're learning and if you're enjoying it. So please take a moment. Also, as always, you can follow us on Linktree. Linktree has all of our YouTube, our Facebook, our Instagram. So please take a moment and follow us. And also, as always, you know how to reach me because you're receiving the emails. But again, there's my phone number, my email. If you want to send me a chat, please do. Finally, thank you so much for next week is James Banks. He is our Society for Human Resources Management. He does public service ethics. It's really a great module. He was with us last cohort as well. I learned something new from him. He's a fabulous speaker. He is actually he was the general counsel for the city of Alexandria, and he has just a great background. So you really don't want to miss James Banks. He will be with us next week. for Saturday, for our first Tuesday for September. And finally, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. We hope you enjoy the rest of your week. For my AV peeps out there, it's going to be in the 109, 8, 10s this week. So it's going to be a hot one. So please stay hydrated, stay cool. We look forward to seeing you next Tuesday. And again, thank you so much for taking this journey with us on the Policy Leadership Academy. Take care and see you next Tuesday, everyone.
Everybody have a great day. God bless you all and God bless America.
Thank you, Fran.
And then we need that.
Thank you very much.
We do, Fran. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a
Kimberly,
great day.
that was
Thank you.
wonderful.
Thank you. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, Kim.